I often hear, people are surprised that it's actually a mini IVF. Having your eggs frozen is the first half of an IVF cycle. So it's not a case of, I'm going to pop along to the clinic tomorrow and have my eggs frozen.
Yeah.
You embark on the stages of the process. And that can begin with something. Sometimes doctors will do something called downregulation, where they shut your ovaries off, maybe for a couple of weeks. It's a bit like a stimulated menopause.
I think we spoke about this briefly as well recently, was let's say I'm a 35-year-old woman. I still have my life partner, and I feel like I'd want to have kids. So it's a way of securing that privilege of having a child later on. Okay, so that's the law. So then what is the procedure like? Like, what does it involve, and what are some of the, I want to say, the psychological factors, attached to it? Because it's not an easy procedure.
No.
And a lot of people don't know that,
No.
I think. Yeah.
And that's a great question. One of the things that I often hear, people are surprised that it's actually a mini IVF. Having your eggs frozen is the first half of an IVF cycle. So it's not a case of, I'm going to pop along to the clinic tomorrow and have my eggs frozen.
Yeah.
You embark on the stages of the process. And that can begin with something. Sometimes doctors will do something called downregulation, where they shut your ovaries off, maybe for a couple of weeks. It's a bit like a stimulated menopause.
Okay.
In those cases are normally if somebody has endometriosis or they have underlying health conditions and they want to try and improve the number and the quality of the eggs. If you are quite healthy and you've had no concerns, they might just start at stage 2, which would be follicle stimulation.
Okay.
So every month our body naturally releases something called FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone.
Okay.
And that makes a couple of our follicles grow. Now, if we're not having medication, by the time we come to ovulation, you'll release 1, maybe 2 eggs, which is how we get non-identical twins. But most people release 1 egg.
Okay.
With IVF, or with the follicle stimulating injections, so this is where we get the injection part that you see pictures of IVF and women injecting themselves.
Exactly, yes.
You inject yourself daily for, it's normally between 10 and 14 days approximately.
Okay.
And you have regular ultrasounds. So what your doctor will do is look at the number of follicles on your ovaries and how they're growing. And they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the doctor in the clinic will adjust your medication depending on how many follicles you have and how you're responding.
Okay.
And then you get to the third step, which is something called a trigger shot. So you go in, you have the ultrasound, and your doctor says, yes, you have a number of follicles. They're all looking a really good size. So let's trigger their maturation. So the final stage of the maturation process.
Okay.
So you have this injection at a very specific time. And then 36 hours later, you go into the clinic. You're heavily sedated, or you have an anesthetic. And then your eggs are removed. And that's done by inserting a needle through the vaginal wall into the ovaries, and they remove the fluid from each follicle.
Okay. That's
then given to the embryologist. The embryologist will clear out the fluid and count how many eggs you have.
Okay.
The number of eggs varies. It really, it changes, but it's average 10 to 15. It's not always about quantity. Quality is very important as well. Some women have a lot more, some women have less, but ultimately those eggs will then be frozen.
Right. Okay. And the validity of these eggs, does it vary, or is it like standard? Like when you freeze them, how long do you have until you have to use them? Is that even a question?
Yeah,
I'm actually curious.
So what was it? What's the... I think it was last year an embryo was defrosted. That was maybe, I think 40 years old now. I'm going to have to go back and have a look at this.
Oh my goodness.
But it was an old enough embryo, and it's absolutely fine. Resulted in a pregnancy.
Unbelievable. Oh, that's fantastic. I never knew that. I thought it was like a 5 to 10 years or whatever.
No, once they're frozen for however long.
Oh,
You
wow.
have to renew the freezing, so you have to pay normally annually to keep eggs and embryos frozen.
Yeah.
And depending on the country you're in, the laws vary. I think initially in the UAE it was 5 years, and then you just apply and they
extend it for you. Okay.
So yeah, there's not really, because it's so new.
Wow.
Fertility treatment is only really, I think it's about 45 years old.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
that's pretty recent. Yeah.
It's not that old.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's where my confusion might have come in, was reading that, you have to renew it every 5 years. And I thought maybe that's like how long it stays valid. But I never knew that it could stay for as long as...
Yeah. And
Fascinating.
the law, I know like laws in the UK originally were you could only freeze it for a certain time period, but they've now extended that. So it is changing all the time.
Wow, fascinating. Okay. And I don't know if you have these numbers. I'm not sure if these things have been released or if there's data collected. But do you know the success rate of these procedures? Like later on, women that have come back and, actually use the eggs to have children?
Again a very good question.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I would say before getting into those statistics is I often say that conceiving is a triangle.
Okay.
And each point of the triangle needs to be aligned for a conception to happen.
All right.
So firstly you have egg and egg quality, and then you have sperm, and then you have environment. So we're looking at the uterus, the uterine thickness. If one of these elements doesn't align, you're not going to conceive.
Right.
So that all needs to happen first. Now, if you've frozen your eggs, and let's say 3 years down the line, you meet the man of your dreams, you marry him, and you say, we want to have a family. Now, equally, you may conceive spontaneously. So when I say fertility preservation, I don't always like that approach, because it's like it's a guaranteed thing.
Okay.
And it's not. I think freezing your eggs is a little bit like an insurance policy that may or may not pay out.
Right.
That, it's not always guaranteed. But if we were to look at an average, say, 33-year-old that's got 10 eggs frozen, when you defrost them, you expect approximately 80 to 90% to survive the thaw, because they don't all survive the thaw.
All right.
So you could be left from 10, you could then have 8.
Okay.
And then you've got to fertilize the remaining 8. And out of that 8, maybe 70 to 80% will fertilize. So you might be left with, say, 6 fertilized eggs. And then they need to make it to day 5 to be transferred. And in that process, you can lose up to 40%. So out of those 10 eggs, a very good number would be 3 embryos that are 5 days old. And that would be great, because that gives you 3 separate attempts if you're having them transferred separately at a pregnancy. We know that on average it takes 3 embryo transfers to achieve a pregnancy. So a lot of people that go into IVF from start to finish don't get pregnant on the first try. So it's a risk. There's no guarantee with it, but it does give you the possibility. And when you freeze your eggs, you're freezing them at the age you are now. So if you're 33 and you freeze your eggs and you use them when you're 39, your chances of conception are based on that of a 33-year-old, not a 39-year-old.
Right. Yeah, that's very important to know, because I think people confuse it. They think, I'm conceiving it as a 39-year-old, but technically and that's the whole point of egg freezing, I feel. I mean, that's essentially the idea behind it. Okay, so moving on to I want to say, I know that you did speak about it, but what are some of the psychological implications that happen post-procedure, I guess? Is there any of that? Or during the process?
I think one element is the unknown. So a lot of people are really surprised by what I was just talking about, the fact that in actual fact you could only end up with, your eggs might not survive the thaw, or if you're doing IVF, you might only end up with 1 embryo. And that's a huge shock, because you're like, well, I have all of these eggs and only this many have fertilized and this many have made it to this day. So psychologically, the pressure can feel huge, because again, it's all on the woman because the process is happening to the woman. So you feel a lot of responsibility to produce enough eggs, to produce a good quality. And then if you don't get a pregnancy out of it, you almost mourn the loss of that embryo, because we always say pregnant until proven otherwise. So once you've had that embryo put in for 2 weeks until you get that positive pregnancy test or negative pregnancy test, or you might get your period before then, you are pregnant. And it can feel like the loss, because you envisage when your baby's going to be due, what you're going to be doing for the next 9 months, how that's going to look. So grief plays a big part in it. Pressure plays a big part in it. Self-blame plays a big part in it as well. Knowing all the information in advance does help, because it's not such a shock, it's not such a surprise if it doesn't go the way you want it to. Right. But equally, you know, many people do have success stories, of course, out of it. Pregnancy, a lot of women I support as well through pregnancy, your goal is pregnancy. So throughout fertility treatment, it's pregnancy, and then when you get to it, you think everything's going to be fine, and then it's not, because then you're like, well, I'm still in the danger zone, I'm going to lose this baby, or I'm going to get to this point and there's going to be a problem. And then it can be very hard to have that pregnancy, because you're always thinking something's going to go wrong because of how hard you fought to get there. For egg freezing, I think women are just like, I'm just going to do it now, and I'll deal with it now. And then when it comes to using their eggs, they haven't really thought about that part. So they don't factor in, where are they going to be financially, how are they going to pay for the other half of treatment. So thinking about all these things so that you don't have the stress and the pressure of when it comes to, in 5 years' time, if this hasn't happened, I want to do this with my eggs. Yes. You don't have to worry about, oh, now I need to transport them to Greece or Spain or
wherever it is. Yeah.
You know, so factoring in those things as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned mourning the loss of the baby when you've had it done, because you feel like, okay, I'm sort of envisioning, you know, like my life with this baby, being pregnant for 9 months. And I read an article recently, I think it was a first person account. This woman wrote her journey with trying to conceive, and it was down to as simple as getting her period. And that was her mourning a loss, because she had been trying for, you know, during her ovulation window, and she thought, okay, this is it. And then once she got her period, it was as if she's mourning a loss. And technically it didn't happen, but it's even as simple as that. So I can only imagine what it's like with a procedure, you know, as big as IVF or you know, with egg freezing and then later on, you know,
you give me goosebumps talking about that, because
really
that I've been in that exact same situation. I've been at work, I've got my period, I've burst into tears.
Exactly.
Because every month is this cycle of hope and of, this is going to be it, and this is the one, and then it's not the one, and then it's tough. Really tough.
It's really tough. And as you said, more so on the woman, because the focus is always on the woman, and you always, and us as women as well, we have a tendency to blame ourselves, and we always go to that as a first instinct. So it's even like, it's sort of like innate. You know.
And it's so easy to blame yourself.
Unbelievable.
And self-criticize. We're very good at that.
Exactly. As women, we're very good at that. Okay, so we can go on and on. I just feel like we can always talk about this topic. No, don't apologize.
Much,
I have so much to ask, but you know, again, you're a very busy woman, and I know that we're on a tight schedule, but I just wanted to ask, because you have so much knowledge, how can people find you? Like, how can I come to Hazel and have like a one-on-one consultation? Do you have like seminars, or do you have consultations? Like, how does it work?
So I do a mixture. I founded the Prepared Pineapple.
Okay.
I like, why the prepared? So the pineapple is a symbol of fertility.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's this, it's an old wives' tale, but it's bromelain is an anti-inflammatory in the blood. So that's in the pineapple.
Pineapples, exactly.
People say if you eat pineapple cores, it will help conception. So it's kind of become this symbol of fertility.
Interesting.
And preparation. I'm that's what I do. I help to prepare people. I give them education. I give them empowerment. So my Instagram, my website is The Prepared Pineapple. I do one-to-one consultations, and I also have an online platform with all the information that you can need if you are trying to conceive spontaneously, if you are going through IVF, if you are freezing your eggs. All the content is there, so you don't have to Google it, and you can access that for as long as you need to. You can kind of watch the videos as you're going through the process, depending where you are, if you're having initial investigations, or if you're about to start IVF, or you want to track your cycle better and know more about ovulation. All of that information is there, so you can reach out to me through the website. Or
that's fabulous. I mean, people don't have to depend on WebMD, to get their answers when, they get it from someone who actually has experience in that area or in that field. Okay, and my last one, I promise. What's your advice? Like, just your advice for people who are either trying to conceive or worried about conceiving, or the journey, their fertility, journey as a whole.
So I would say educate yourself.
Right.
Make sure you're fully informed so that you can make informed decisions. Try not to feel pressured into anything, especially with egg freezing and with IVF. There can be a lot of pressure. You can have an appointment, and I spoke to a client the other day, and she's like, we only had one consultation, and they were like, you should just do this now, come back on your next period and we'll start the process. And they were like, I'm not ready, I don't want to. So be your own advocate, because no one else is going to advocate for you. And the biggest thing that I always say, wherever you are, is always trust your instincts. If you feel something isn't right and somebody dismisses you or says, don't worry about it, go and see someone else.
Nice.
If you're ready and you just want to do an IVF, then do one. But always trust your gut and what that tells you, because it's very rarely wrong.
There you have it. Educate yourself, trust your gut, and visit The Prepared Pineapple to get more information. Hazel, thank you so much. It was lovely having you. We'd love to have you back. I mean, these topics are always, bringing up other topics, and there's always more to talk about. So we'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Thank
it's been
you.
a pleasure.